may be a difference in intensity, but I think it's an issue in some other ways for women as well. You know, whether it's as powerful or not, I think it maybe goes in different directions. But I would say, again, it's where is this leading me? Is this leading me in a direction of having a capacity to attach in a healthy, intimate way with a marital partner? Or is this leading me into a more isolative or more fragmented approach, or a more fantasy-driven approach to sexuality, where I don't really need another person to pursue that? And if it's the latter, then I think it really is, you know, it's going to be problematic. You know, it may not be as intense. I mean, you know, images are pretty intense, but still it's the same issue.
Yeah, I think it's the idea of the romanticizing of something that's not real. And again, a writer can create a scenario that's, okay, it looks appealing or whatnot, but how realistic is that? And so the need in our human relationships is to be able to have real conversation, real dialogue about our relationships, how we can care for each other, how we can love each other in a healthy way. And that some of those romantic kind of settings can be recreated and should be thought of and doing within every marital relationship especially. I think most of the time the reason why couples are struggling is because they aren't paying attention to each other in a romantic kind of way that every woman loves to be pursued. You know, Becky shares this with the couples that we have a chance to counsel at times, is like that pursuing should never stop. You know, the idea that she is the one that I desire to be with more than anybody else. And so doing little things throughout the day that help to keep that romanticism going on. And it's easy to let those things die because you're with each other every day, day in and day out. But that sense of romance needs to be kindled throughout. And sometimes people, when women are reading these, they get this vision of, well, how come he's not like the Daniel Steele novel or whoever it is?
Yeah, you all seen the Old Spice commercial? The guy on the horse? Okay. That pokes fun at this, but it's also playing on those kind of romantic, unrealistic references.
There's a statistic in my mind that I can't ignore right now, and while you know the ratio of women addicted to porn to men is completely, I can't think straight right now. I'm sorry, I'm overwhelmed by your faces. It's about 30% and growing in women, and then you know the rest being men. But it's proven that women are way more likely to act on what they see or what they imagine than men are. So they're more likely to go out and find what they've been fantasizing about. So think about that. It's kind of crazy.
There was a question that just came in about just what is considered porn in a romance narrative. I guess it sort of bridges along the same how far is too far line, but I think there's some questions there.
That's a good question.
Can you say it again?
Yeah, the question is, what is really defined as porn in a romance novel? So when you're describing a romantic setting, where does it cross the line? If we're going to talk about lines, I think it comes back to the idea of where's it leading? Is it leading into something that is deviant from what God's design was? And again, I'm not sure exactly how porn is defined. I haven't never really looked it up.
Well, I don't think we have a good definition. Look, I wouldn't say that the average romance novel on the shelf of Myers, I wouldn't classify that as pornography, frankly. I mean, I think that at that point it becomes so broadly applied that it doesn't have any meaning anymore. So I think there's some level of explicitness that has to be there, okay? You know, so she gazed adoringly up into his eyes. I mean, I don't think that's pornography, all right? That may nonetheless be leading that person in a direction that's not the healthiest, but is that porn? No, no more than it is to have an implied sexual encounter on a PG-13 movie, okay? So I think to call something pornography in any meaningful sense, there has to be, in my view anyway, a degree of explicitness to that, okay? But I think the point is that it's not just explicitness that determines whether it's good and healthy and godly for us, okay?
There's even the distinction of soft porn, they call that, and again, it's the direction of where this is leading. It's given the image that your mind is going further to want to be even further explicit than what is being depicted in the particular image.
I think as believers, I know I fall into this quite readily. I can pursue my Christian life from the standpoint of avoiding too much sin, okay? Which is really different than what Scripture calls me to. Scripture God calls me to pursue a life of holiness. That's an entirely different approach to living than sin avoidance. Okay? And I think sometimes we do the same thing sexually. There's a popular book, some of you have probably read it, Every Man's Battle, and various spin-offs on the franchise. I have a lot of issues with some of that because there's some of what is written in that book that I think perpetuates some unhealthy sexual stereotypes. One of which is women don't really like sex. Men do, so wives, you just got to put up with it. I mean, I'm caricaturing it a bit, but there's a bit of that message. That is not, from my vantage point, a biblical message at all. However, one thing that is very good about that series is they emphasize that our goal is to pursue purity. Our goal is to pursue holiness, okay, which renders some of these definitional things as far less significant in terms of what's porn, what's not. Because again, it's the question of, is this leading me towards a deepening relationship with another and with the Lord, or is this leading me away from that?
I'm on a Bible study this season right now. We're studying Romans 12. And many of you have heard the Romans 12, 1 and 2 of, the second verse that says, do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I'm struck by that comment that sometimes that we think about things that we're supposed to avoid, but rather think about it, what should I be filling my mind with that helps me to become transformed? And I've been doing kind of an assessment of my own life, and so I even mentioned The Bachelor, and thinking, okay, what is that putting into my mind? How am I allowing God to speak to my mind, so that my behavior, my attitudes, my thoughts would be transformed? And so again, it's the idea of what are we feeding ourselves with? And if we continue to feed ourselves with deviant or explicit material, well, that's probably the behaviors that are going to come out, or that's what our thought life is going to be focused on. And it's not to say that we can't think romantically, sexually of each other as a couple. It simply means, am I being appropriate with the direction our lives and my mind is trying to focus on? So that's been a helpful thing for me, at least, to focus a little bit more and thinking, how am I filling God's picture, His thoughts, His Word into my mind that helps that to be transformed?
Dan, you mentioned reference points. Can you speak to, or both of you speak to, what are the impacts or consequences on relationships? Pornography, what does it do to relationships?
There's one situation that comes immediately to my mind, and that is a guy, I saw him first, and his complaint was, his wife had basically sent him in, kind of with an ultimatum to deal with this pornography issue. His complaint to me was, well, yeah, I look at porn, but my wife just really isn't into sex. It's really frustrating. I interviewed her, and she took a credible position that she was very interested in sex. However, it was a bit of a turnoff for her husband to be demanding that she tackle him in the hallway in some kind of, scantily clad thing as a routine part of their sexual repertoire. All right? He had a grossly unrealistic perception of what a marital sexual relationship is like. Okay? And he had gotten that expectation through persistent, frequent exposure to pornography, which portrays sexual encounters as rather amazing, hours-long endeavors. Okay? And portrays women as just absolutely desperate to perform sexual acts on men. Okay? That ain't real life. All right? And so it creates comparison points. Wow, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like.